Great, thank you so much, Tom. I'm just going to make sure that you can admit anyone else that's come to the webinar or joining a little bit late. So yeah, welcome everyone, and thanks for joining today's Trends webinar. I'm Nicole, the head of social media at Pomegranate, and I'll be kicking off today's session. You know, as social media professionals, nothing excites us more than keeping up with the latest trends and innovations in the industry. Every so often, we pick up new developments that completely change the way that humans interact with the digital world. And the fact that trends are determined by huge seismic shifts in society is such a testament to the last 2 years, because it's been exactly that. So if you're feeling like a different person 2 years into the pandemic, imagine just how much the digital world has changed. So let's dive in and talk about it. So marketing trends, you know, they're always changing, but it doesn't mean that the old trends don't stop happening just because the calendar's rolled forward 1 year. Some of the biggest trends that we saw in 2021 are following us into 2022. The first being that social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram are still favoring video content. That's it. Videos are trending at the moment. So what this technically means is that posts published with a video automatically perform significantly better than static images, or if you upload a post that has a link maybe to an article. And this means that it performs better organically. And throughout the webinar, if we talk about performance being organic, what we mean is that how the posts perform on its own without having any promotion budget spent on it. Then another trend that's here to stay is that using platform functionality is still the key to boosting your organic engagement. This means incorporating your functions like tagging or hashtags or adding links or using LinkedIn articles, etc. Using the functionality that the platform provides you with for making posts is going to mean that your posts perform better when you publish them organically. We've also seen that YouTube has grown to the second largest social media platform by monthly active users. And what this means is that your brand really can't afford not to advertise or utilize YouTube's reach as an advertising medium. In terms of your content for this year, impact marketing is what consumers are looking for. What this means is that your brand needs to support a cause or have something that you believe in, and not just on paper, but using your social media platforms to show tangible, concrete proof that you stand for something beyond making a profit. So whether that's within your social media posts or any of your online communications, bringing that kind of impact or cause-based conversation through. A recent survey that we saw by Hootsuite found that 64% of consumers have actually switched to only purchasing from brands who are actively fighting for change. I mean, so if you think of your own consumer habits, you know, you're likely going to, or when you hear a story about an impact that a brand's making or a cause that a brand stands for, if they're going more sustainable, more environmentally friendly, etc., you're more likely interested and you kind of feel good when purchasing from them. So if you keep that in mind, you start to better understand how kind of consumers are changing their mindsets when shopping in the digital space. Then
we made a fancy tight dress out of pink velour.
Tom, if you can mute that.
Yes, I'm just trying to find the right one, which is difficult.
Cool. Then moving on, shopping on social media is not only growing, but it's becoming much more accessible. And this is really exciting for us who really enjoy using platforms like Facebook Marketplace or Instagram shopping to shop and to search for local brands. So if you have an e-commerce business, this is definitely worth looking into in the new year. Then lastly, what we've also found really interesting is, so last year we picked up the trend of Pinterest's kind of return to glory, and the platform is still growing. Another cool development is the rise and recognition of what's now termed Pinterest influencers. And being a Pinterest influencer is actually pretty similar to being an Instagram influencer. It just means that you have a large following and that you collaborate with brands on the platform and promote their products and then gain kind of commission from, how much you're able to kind of sell through either a unique code that you get or something like that. So while Pinterest is growing quickly, it is surprising that the platform itself hasn't made much change. If you go and you log on again into your Pinterest account that you maybe haven't, logged on in a good couple years, you'll easily find your way around and you'll find that not much has actually changed on that platform. So it is quite interesting to see how much the platform has grown, even though they haven't made that many changes to the database or user interface. Cool. So moving on to this really interesting graph that we wanted to share with you. This graph is courtesy of a collaboration between Hootsuite and Data Reportal, where we like to keep up and look at the kind of yearly stats that they release. It's really interesting. So what you are looking at here is the world's most used social media platforms. And you can really start to see that how much YouTube has grown in relation to Facebook. If you look at YouTube being number 2 there on the list. And then what's also really interesting to see is that Facebook, which now owns WhatsApp, Instagram, as well as Facebook Messenger, they make up the monopoly of the kind of top most used platforms. So this is really just to give you that indication of how much kind of user base and reach Facebook has as a whole when you combine all of their platforms. Another really interesting thing that I wanted to share with you was if you look right at the bottom, I think the third one from the bottom, which is Twitter. It's so interesting to see that Pinterest has actually grown larger than Twitter, which is just above it over there on the graph. And this doesn't mean that Twitter has shrunk or is not growing anymore or less people are using the platform. What it means is that Pinterest has grown such a scale where it's actually surpassed Twitter's growth, which is just really interesting for us to see and to monitor that platform for potential use for clients in this year. Cool. So now we've talked about what's here to stay. Let's talk about what's different. So I'm sure this is no surprise to you how rapid social media is growing. There are now more than 4.5 billion social media users around the world. And what that equates to is an average of 13 new users starting to use social media every single second. And that's people that are using social media for the first time. Buzzwords like QR, AR, and VR, those are the sectors that are most likely to see a rapid scale expansion as brands start to connect the physical world to the virtual. So just to explain those buzzwords, and it might be surprising to you, but you've actually probably used these in your everyday life. So QR is referring to the kind of QR codes that you use with online payments like SnapScan. AR refers to kind of real world gameplay applications like what the kids were playing Pokemon Go. That's a great example of AR. And then VR, the virtual reality headsets that people are using to kind of immerse themselves in virtual conferences and virtual spaces these days. What we also found really interesting that's growing at a significant scale is podcasts. So now 1 in 5 internet users between the ages of 16 and 64 around the world are now listening to podcasts each week. And if you didn't know, you can actually upload your music or your podcast to Spotify for free. And from there, it's just about, marketing in order to help your podcast or whatever you've uploaded there take off. So it's really becoming a kind of tangible platform to use. Something that's really keeping us on our toes as digital marketers is the significant increase in the cost of social media ads. So just to give you an example, advertisers are spending an average of 14% more on their social media ads than they did a year ago. So what this means really is that advertisers around the world, we're paying on average about 141 Rand now for 1,000 social media ad impressions. We can obviously work our magic to try to get this number down, but just to give you guys an average of what's being spent. But at the same time, while we're spending more to pay for social media ads, those ads are also delivering fewer total impressions, despite spending more overall. So impressions is really the number of times your ad is served. So although you're spending more, your ad is actually served fewer times. So it's really getting a lot more competitive for social media advertisers out there. So this is a really significant, cool graph that I wanted to share with you, also from the guys at Hootsuite, just to show you how social media has grown over the last 10 years. Looking at the first bar graph there, 2012, and how it's just seen a rise year after year after year. When we were doing the webinar last year, there was quite a lot of rumor about, social media not growing as much, people switching off their social media platforms because of digital fatigue, etc. And so we kind of didn't expect social media to grow at the scale that it has, but it's still seen a significant growth if you look at the difference between 2021 and 2022. But it did decline slightly from the growth between 2020 and 2021. So it's still growing, and it's bigger than it's ever been before. So another challenge for us as social media marketers this year will be the rising competition of engagement online. When we talk about engagement, we're talking about people liking a post, people commenting on a post, people sharing a post, etc. Any kind of interaction that a user takes with your content online. So Facebook pages can now expect an average engagement rate of just 0.07%. So what that means is that on average, just 7 followers out of every 10,000 followers that you have will react to, comment on, or share any of your posts organically. So this further reinforces why a social media advertising strategy is so important, because social media platforms want you to spend more money. So they're kind of decreasing the amount of organic engagement that you're able to achieve, so that you'll then run ads and promotions. And it's kind of become effectively the only way that you can reach large quantities of people organically. They've even made it harder for larger pages, so larger brands, influencers, etc. Pages that have more than 100,000 followers, they can expect to have an organic engagement rate of just 0.05%. So it's even difficult, or even more difficult, for larger pages. Cool. So now we're going to dive into what's changed by platform. We've spoken about how social media has changed as a whole. And I'm going to hand over to Melissa, who's going to take you through all of the cool changes in Facebook and Instagram.
Thanks very much, Nicole. Hello, everybody. As you know, my name is Melissa, and I am a social media strategist at Pomegranate. So let's just dive into what's changed on Facebook and Instagram. So the Facebook company is now Meta, and with this rebrand, they're going to continue dominating the social media space. The Facebook app is still pretty much the same, but the biggest change that we've seen has come in the form of the Metaverse. And tech brands such as NVIDIA and Epic Games are already finding ways to capitalize on so-called metaversing, which of course refers to interactions that take place in this virtual space. But what is the Metaverse? Well, it's a fully realized computer-generated world that combines augmented, virtual, and mixed reality technologies, in which users are not just only scrolling and posting and commenting, but they're also interacting with each other. So think The Sims or Second Life if you ever played any of those games, but if that's still a bit too abstract for you, let me explain a bit further. It's basically an immersive online experience. So you'll be you, just in an avatar form, and you'll be able to move through this virtual world in which you can attend meetings, go to class, do your shopping, watch a show, meet up with your friends, all manner of things. So it kind of sounds a bit like The Matrix or The Terminator or some other kind of sci-fi movie, but the future is here, folks. And now we're not saying that you have to start metaversing tomorrow, but you could start thinking about the possibilities for the future in terms of accessibility, for example. But let's also think strategically about what you have at your disposal right now. The Facebook app is far from dead, as some marketers thought that it would be at some stage. And there are a number of exciting trends that have come up that can actually help you strengthen your Facebook strategy. For example, statistics show that more than 4 billion video views take place on Facebook every single day. So you want to make sure that you use some video content to cut through all of that noise, as this is what the algorithm actually prefers. It may seem a bit daunting at first, but there are so many useful tools out there for free, even in mobile app versions, that you can use to create some stunning video content. For us, Canva is one particular tool that we use quite often that is super user-friendly. It's got some very easy-to-use templates to create great video content, not just for your evergreen strategies, but also for ads as well. And speaking of ads, another significant thing to note here is that as 93% of all social media marketers are now using Facebook ads for marketing, the competition is growing and it's fierce. So ads on the platform are more expensive now and they're yielding fewer results. So it's really important for you to understand the kind of content that works specifically for your brand and think about your ad copy, know your audience very well, and also develop your strategy around those particular parameters. Ads in Facebook Marketplace are also now reaching more than 560 million users each month. And that equates to more than a quarter of the platform's total ad reach, which is a huge chunk. So that's something that you want to think about if you have a specific product or service that you're looking to advertise. The social commerce is growing quite significantly, so you want to try and capitalize on that as much as possible. It's also important to bear in mind that Meta owns a number of other social media platforms besides Facebook, including Instagram and WhatsApp. So you want to also plan content strategically so that it's not just duplicated across platforms. In other words, you want to avoid what is called content pollution, which is basically where you're posting pretty much the same content on your Facebook, on your LinkedIn, on your Twitter account. And users now are really kind of picking up on that quite a lot these days and really are getting quite fatigued by that. So to illustrate this visually, we've included this table by dots reportal, which illustrates to you the number of, or the percentage of users rather, on each social media platform that are also using other platforms. So as you can see, 77% of Facebook users are also using Instagram. So you want to bear that in mind if you're on both of these platforms and want to maybe avoid sharing the same information to that page to the same people. But it also, of course, depends on the following that you have on each of those different platforms. Also, 80% of Twitter users are also using YouTube. So Twitter may actually be a pretty good app for you to use to promote your YouTube videos, for example, and share links to those videos on that platform as well. As content creators, we also emphasize working smart quite often. So as you can see in the table as well, only 42% of YouTube consumers are also on TikTok. So there is a little bit more wiggle room there for you to publish the same content on YouTube as well, especially with YouTube Shorts now becoming a thing. It may also be quite helpful for you to establish which particular social media platforms that you want to focus your efforts on. So think very carefully about where your audience will be most active, develop platform-specific strategies, but also be quite strategic about where you also spend a lot of your time. Okay, so moving on to Instagram now. So last year, the head of Instagram announced a number of very exciting developments for the platform, which are geared towards ensuring that users have the most enjoyable experience as possible. So one of the biggest changes that we can expect to see this year is the reversion to the chronological feed. So you may have noticed that when you're scrolling through Instagram, you always see the same people and their content over and over and over again. And this is pretty much what Instagram thinks that you want to see, but they're trying to change it as much as possible. So now with this new development, users will see posts in sequential order of when it was posted and thus see a variety of content from people that they follow. And this also means that the time of day for posting becomes really important for you. So it's essential that you truly understand your audience's behavior on the platform and kind of post accordingly. Another interesting development to note here that we also picked up is what is currently in testing phase at present is a feature that allows you to toggle between 3 different feeds featuring your favorites, who you're following, and what Instagram thinks that you may like to see based on your behavior on the app. So again, that's something to bear in mind because for a brand, it means you want to create content that is valuable enough for users to consider you to be one of their favorites and add you to their favorites feed. But like I said, it's still in testing phase, but something to bear in mind. Research shows that 70% of Instagram users also watch stories daily. So this is also another good space for you to post content to improve its reach. So that could be through either sharing posts directly from your grid to your story or creating specific story content. all users can also now add link stickers to their stories, as opposed to the swipe up link, which was only kind of available to a select few users on the platform. And this is one of many tools that's made brand and influencer collaboration a lot easier these days. So another example of this would be the invite collaborator feature that is on the app as well, that you can use to create a joint post with another user. So when you add a collaborator to your post, that post will also appear on their grid as well. And this has already been used by brands and influencers alike to capitalize on influencer marketing. So another really cool feature to bear in mind. As we've already touched on as well, social commerce is going to become an $80 billion industry by the year 2025. So as with Facebook, shopping on Instagram will continue to grow as Instagram shop demand increases as well. The platforms are really trying to keep us on them as much as possible. So it may be something good for you to think about for your products, for you to promote and showcase your goods and services as well by having a shop on the platform that enables users to be able to buy directly from you without having to leave the app ever. Also important to note is that ads in Instagram's home feed now reach 96.6% of Instagram's active user base each month. And this is pretty much their entire user base. So these placements remain the surest way that you could reach the largest Instagram audience. Bear in mind, of course, that you don't have to be on Instagram to run ads there. You can also do so through Facebook, and the ad will appear on Instagram with a link to your website, shop, or wherever else you choose to direct users. So to demonstrate the potential reach of Instagram ads visually to you all, we've also included another infographic from Data Reportal. And this, again, illustrates the potential reach of Instagram ads for marketers who are using them at present. So interestingly, 1.48 billion users, which equates to roughly a third of total internet users, could potentially be reached through these ads. And that's quite a significant amount of people that you could potentially be reaching. This data also shows that ad reach continues to grow each quarter and every single year. And we can also see that it also indicates who marketers could potentially reach by gender, as well as by segment of the world's population. So this really shows some great opportunities to kind of take advantage of Instagram ads if done so strategically. Of course, bearing in mind what we've already shared about data pollution, changes to the newsfeed, engagement rates declining, and other functionalities on the platform. I'll now hand over to Anya, who will talk to you about Twitter and TikTok.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anya. I'm a junior social media strategist at Pomegranate, and I'll be jumping right into Twitter. So Twitter's timeline generates a 31% higher emotional connection and 28% higher levels of memorability versus the social media average. This can be attributed to the short word count limit per tweet, which means text is short, sharp, and easy to remember. And in terms of generating a higher emotional connection, think about your own experiences of Twitter. When controversial opinions are shared by popular or powerful figures, Twitter can generate huge amounts of outrage, support, or even sympathy. And this is why, if you're wary of your content attracting the wrong type of emotional connection, it might be best to consider keeping content on this platform as straightforward as possible. Videos are a cornerstone of the Twitter platform's appeal, and tweets with videos get 10 times more engagement. So this speaks to our shortening attention spans when it comes to consuming content, and Twitter caters to this with their limit in video length, so videos need to be 2 minutes or shorter on the platform. We've also seen the growth of Twitter Spaces. So Twitter Spaces are a functionality within the app where live audio conversations happen. And you can think of this as a Zoom call, but with audio only, where anyone can join and where topics of discussion range from absolutely anything, business tips to politics, to fan clubs, to social advocacy. And the popularity of Twitter Spaces now also means that new updates are being introduced regularly for users to engage with speakers, and ticketing is now also available for those who want to monetize their spaces, creating what is essentially an easily accessible paid webinar. So moving on to this graph, This one is really interesting because if we consider the graph that Nicole previously showed us, which was most used social media platforms, here we have favorite social media platforms. And it's really interesting to think about how a favorite platform can be measured, because you're not just looking at data like age and gender, which is easily recorded. You're technically looking at measuring emotion, which can be slightly more complex. So the way this is done is through a process called sentiment analysis and survey data. And what this means is that you're looking at people's general opinions about platforms and then segmenting this into positive, neutral, or negative. And so we can see that WhatsApp is a solid favorite. I'm sure most of us have already opened this app numerous times today. And what we can see about Twitter here is that it's highly ranking with positive sentiment as well, and it's just below TikTok. Speaking of TikTok, so because TikTok is so new in South Africa, there's still so much opportunity for brands to break through, both new and established brands. And stats also show us that if your audience is between the ages of 18 to 24, you can no longer afford not to be on TikTok. TikTok users aged 18 and above, particularly in the United States, now equate to more than half, and that's 50.3% of all American adults. And the latest data suggests that TikTok has been adding an average of more than 650,000 new users every day over the past 3 months, which equates to almost 8 new users every second. TikTok ads now also enable marketers to reach 10% of the world's total population, regardless of age or location, 15% of everybody aged 18 and above, regardless of location. And meanwhile, TikTok's content-focused algorithm means that the platform's billion-plus users now have significantly more chance of being exposed to content created from someone on the other side of the world than they would on platforms where algorithms prioritize a user's social graph. So because of this global exposure, it adds to the excitement of creating videos on the app because of the idea that anyone can go viral. So in this graph, we're looking at a profile of TikTok's advertising audience. These are TikTok's key audience segments globally. So if any of these segments relate to your target audience, then you'd want to consider whether the platform makes sense for your brand. The highest segment here is 18 to 24-year-olds, with 24.7% being female and 18.1% being male. This means that should you decide to create targeted ads for this segment, your potential reach globally could be at 42%. However, what we also see in this graph is a decline in audiences between the ages of 35 to 55. And so if this includes your target audience, it would be better to consider focusing your content on platforms like Facebook and Twitter. And I'm now going to hand over to Nicole, who will take us through LinkedIn.
Great, thanks, Anya. So diving into a more professional B2B or B2C based social media platform, LinkedIn really can't be ignored this year. Our analysis of data published to the platform's advertising resources reveals that LinkedIn's registered member base has increased by around 11% over the last 12 months. That is quite a significant increase for the platform. What we're also seeing on the rise is what's called LinkedIn influencers, and there are now over 180 million senior level influencers on this platform. So when I talk about a LinkedIn influencer, I'm not just talking about someone that has a large following, and they're getting a lot of engagement and their posts are going viral. To become an official influencer on LinkedIn, you have to actually be invited by LinkedIn, the platform itself. And to qualify for that, you need to have achieved some sort of serious success, already be famous in your niche on the platform. But what this kind of influencer status in collaboration with LinkedIn gives you, it means that your posts, the algorithm will automatically acknowledge your posts as performing and give your post the opportunity to perform better. but also you're open up to kind of collaborations with LinkedIn as a platform. As you know, they are promoting their kind of online course offering, etc. So it gives you those opportunities to collaborate with the platform and push those in exchange for being monetized by the platform as well. And then a popular trend that we've been discussing a lot at Pomegranate is this 4-step formula to writing a viral, high traction LinkedIn post. So what this essentially is it guides the way that you write your post with regards to how you kind of start your post with a punchy hook, what hashtags you include, what tags you include, what types of images you include. And what we found is that this formula can be a hit and miss, but it's really helped users better understand how the platform algorithm works. Then, because ads on LinkedIn are like quite expensive, we found that ads on LinkedIn are more expensive than any of the other social media platforms. So it came at no surprise to us that 99% of LinkedIn search traffic still originates from organic search. So this means that networking and word of mouth still plays a large role in visibility on the platform. And so time investment is still key in terms of your marketing strategy this year if you want to build a presence on LinkedIn. And time investment can be, in relation to your community management efforts, connecting with people, liking posts, sharing, making sure you have all of the right trending hashtags, posting at the right times of day, etc. So these are all like innovative tools that you can use when you put together your LinkedIn strategy to ensure that there's growth on that platform organically, because ads are quite expensive. Cool. So then moving on to YouTube, sorry, giving you a snapshot into the potential of YouTube for your marketing strategy. The platform now accounts for the greatest total spend using social media apps on Android phones. And it also clocks the highest average time per user. What this means essentially is that users are spending much more time on YouTube than any other platform on their phones globally. And that kind of makes sense. If you think about your own habits on YouTube, it's the app where you're most likely to watch longer form videos than any other of the short form video platforms like Facebook or Instagram. You have more patience with the platform, and so you're kind of spending longer lengths of time on there. If you think of YouTube's kind of collaboration with smart devices, you can now watch YouTube videos on your TVs at home, and thus that kind of builds up that duration of time that users are spending on the platform. So not only has YouTube also closed the gap with Facebook over the last year, remember how we saw the size of YouTube in relation to Facebook in an earlier graph. The platform's audience is now actively growing at almost twice as fast as Facebook's. So we're really like monitoring that quite closely, and the kind of predictions and discussions all around whether YouTube is going to overtake Facebook in size. So I guess we'll just wait and see, and we'll report back in the next webinar that we have. But in fact, YouTube has grown so significantly that ads on the platform now have the potential to reach roughly 1 in 3 people on Earth. So this is really just giving you insights into the type of reach that you can achieve by running ads on this platform. Obviously, the ads are video based. So it's something, again, to think about, like there's this whole untapped market that you're maybe not exploring within your marketing strategies at the moment. And a short 5-second, 15-second video clip that you can advertise or use to advertise on a platform like YouTube could make a big difference in your brand awareness and your reach for this year. So again, just looking at the time that people are spending on social media apps, we thought this Hootsuite graph was again really interesting. So we spoke about YouTube being the top performing platform in regards to how much time people are spending on it, and you can see here that people globally are spending on average like 24 hours on the platform every month, which is quite significant amount of time to spend on an app. Other really interesting ones that are popping up here is definitely WhatsApp, that's a kind of no-brainer, knowing how much time we all spend. It's the #1 kind of communications platform that we use locally. Instagram is also high. TikTok, even though what was surprising to me about TikTok was even though the videos are quite short, they're kind of 15 seconds, 10 seconds, because people's attention spans on that app are quite short. You kind of only have 4 seconds these days to get someone's attention on a platform like TikTok. It's still, people are still spending a significant time on the platform. And I've seen this in my own habits where you'll go onto TikTok and you'll kind of look up 2 hours later and you won't know where the time's gone. So it just goes to show the kind of short form, punchy videos do captivate people. And that is why the platform is growing at such a significant rate that it is. The last really interesting one that I saw on this graph was the platform Telegram. If you remember when Facebook announced that they were buying WhatsApp, everyone kind of freaked out because they sent through this notifications that, you know, WhatsApp's privacy settings are going to be updated and Facebook will now have access to that kind of user data through WhatsApp as well. People kind of said they're never going to use WhatsApp again, and they started downloading apps like Telegram, which is similar to WhatsApp. And after that kind of fad and everyone was talking about it died down, most people returned to WhatsApp, and I kind of assumed that Telegram would be a thing of the past. But looking at the data, it's clear that Telegram is still something that's growing. It's still an app that people are using significantly around the world. And so that's just a really interesting thing that we wanted to share. Cool. So that brings us to the end of today's webinar. And we know that these new trends and rapid developments in the social media world can feel a little bit overwhelming. So our advice to you is to stay in the loop, exactly what you are doing now, but to place your focus on how to make the best use of what you already have access to. Don't get me wrong, Metaverse has plenty of future business potential, but think about it, it's not necessarily going to be the answer to your woes in 2022. So do yourself a mental health favor, set some time to keep up with trends like attending webinars, etc. And focus on how you can succeed with your social media strategy today. You can also feel free to make some time to chat to us. We can talk strategy and what your plans are for the year ahead. But I think that's pretty much it in terms of the trends, and we'll now answer a few of the questions that you've shared in the chat box throughout the call, and then any other questions that you have, please feel to pop them in the chat as well.
Fantastic. Thanks, Nicole, Anya, Melissa. That was really, really enjoyable. And yeah, I feel like I learned a lot more, and I might even know what's happening in the metaverse, like to some degree. Thank you so much to everyone that put through questions in the chat. I've collected the ones that have come through, but everyone else, please continue to send through any questions you might have in the chat that might be inspired by the Q&A or by the webinar as a whole. But to get things started, some really great questions that came through, and I think ones that would apply to everyone. The first question that we got asked was, do you think that impact marketing is as important in more corporate B2B environments? And this is from Yasmin. Nicole, do you feel, Nicole, what's your take on that question?
Cool. Yeah, I think it would largely depend on an assessment of your audience. Obviously, you mentioned B2B, but who are the businesses that you are marketing to, that you're sharing content with? Is impact marketing something that's important to them? We've seen impact marketing really grow in the kind of business sector where companies are choosing to adopt that kind of way of marketing and adopt that kind of tone and language in the content that they share. Not in every single post, but just saying, hey, this is who we are and this is what we stand for. So what I would advise is to really look into those businesses who you are targeting, analyze your audience and dive a little bit deeper and see if that's something that's important to them. You might be surprised that that's also something that will attract new businesses that maybe have never heard of you, but now know that you're aligned to this particular cause or you're making this particular impact. So it might be a kind of new opportunity for you as well. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Nicole. Actually, just to quickly jump in, for those that were a bit late to the session, I think ESCOM has done it dirty, but thank you for all of those that could make it. We are going to upload the webinar recording on our website and social media. So thankfully, the team have just shown our links there. So please do give us a follow and you'll be sure to see that. Another question from the chat group. Why do you think Pinterest didn't change much as a platform? And how do you make the most out of Pinterest as a brand? Is it best for specific industries? This is a question from Bilal. Sorry, Nicole, to put you on the spot, but I know you mentioned Pinterest in your intro, so I think you might be best placed to say a bit more.
Yeah, I think it's definitely an interesting question, and not one I can say for sure why they haven't changed much with regards to updates to the platform. But I think it has a lot to do with their kind of user base being older. So they have a much older user base, and people have been using that app for such a long time, and people are then returning to that app as well. And so if you think of having an older user base, having a kind of platform that feels familiar, where you know kind of what's going on, how it works, etc., not something brand new that you have to learn. I feel that plays a big part into why they've kept the user interface largely the same. But I'm sure there's lots of other reasons that they have as well. And then I think there was another part to the question, right, Tom?
Let me double check. No, I think, is it best for specific industries? That was the second part of the question.
So it's definitely quite an industry-specific platform and quite niche with regards to the types of audiences that exist there. For your company or for your brand specifically, what I would suggest is to go onto that platform and to look at other businesses within your industry. Are they on there? What types of things are they posting? Are they successful? Do they have a large following? All of these things can give you an idea of whether or not it will be kind of fruitful to invest time in being on a platform like Pinterest, or whether or not it will be kind of waste of time. Generally, what I've seen is kind of event planning spaces, travel companies, as well as DIY or people that are selling tangible products. That works really well on Pinterest. But I think a little bit of that kind of audience research will really just give you an idea of if it's worth your time or not.
Great. Thanks, Nicole. Yeah, super interesting. Pinterest, yeah, that was a big thing that came out for us when we did the first run through of the webinar. For me, it was really incredible to see that Pinterest has grown so much as a platform, despite the fact that it's kind of kept it quite similar. Another really good question, which came through also from Bilal. I want to pose this to Melissa, because I think she's probably best placed to talk about podcasts, as she's in the podcast world. What's the podcast scene looking like in SA in terms of both content creators and users? Melissa, could you give us a bit of insight into that? Like, what have you noted locally?
Sure thing. So I've seen that I think it's really picking up a lot of steam. I think it's also just due to there not being as much uptake, I think, from users generally, because I think we're not really as exposed to podcasts as maybe people are in other countries as well. But it definitely is growing quite a lot. I've seen a lot of local podcasts, especially around entertainment, really becoming quite popular. Entertainment, gaming, as well as some podcasts on social courses as well, also are becoming quite popular as well. Also because of things like data cuts for us here as well. Podcasts won't take up as much data as say watching a YouTube video, things like that. So it is becoming a lot more accessible, I think, to people, and people are really starting to, I think, just because of the convenience of podcasts, of listening to podcasts as well, really now listening to them a lot more and finding local content now, because it has been, I think, advertised a lot more. It is picking up quite a bit of steam. So I think there should be quite an interesting boom and a lot more local content from podcasters and content creators coming up very soon. So I definitely think it's something that I think a lot of brands should really also consider as well, incorporating into their strategies too.
Thanks, Melissa. No, and I think, yeah, a common theme that's come through, which is no surprise, lockdown. I think the kind of growth of podcasts and audio platforms is closely linked to people just having more time on their hands at home. So yeah, no, that's super interesting to see. Another question with regards to well, a really important one, which Nicole, I think, was inspired by your mention about people and their habits in terms of how much time they spend on platforms and kind of being careful not to duplicate content. So this is a question that came through from Helga. Isn't duplication of content how you grow various audiences across platforms? So perhaps, Nicole, you could give some tips in terms of, how does one kind of differentiate your strategies, even though you're kind of dealing with different platforms?
Mm-hmm. So I think that there's definitely some truth to that, and still some truth to that. So before social media platforms were at the kind of scale that they were at, people didn't necessarily have as many platforms or weren't on every single social media platform. And so when you kind of posted the same content on other platforms, it was an opportunity to reach more people. But what we're seeing now is that people or users, depending on how big your audience base is as well and who you're trying to reach, users kind of get fatigued by seeing the same content when you log into Facebook than onto another platform. That is why we kind of write content a little bit differently for Facebook or for Twitter, etc. But it also kind of calls for that kind of shake up with regards to how content is written. But definitely to kind of box clever with content and to work smartly. If you look at your audience base and you see that not a lot of the same people are following you on Facebook than they are following you on Twitter, then it's worth boxing clever with your content and using the same types of content that you're posting, just so that you can keep regular posting up on that platform and also be reaching kind of new audiences within both spaces. So I think it is definitely a case-by-case basis on that kind of audience assessment, and if it's working for your brand or if it needs a kind of shake-up.
Awesome. Thanks, Nicole. The next question, I think, is one that you've kind of addressed through your other answers, but I'm going to kind of pose it to you anyway and see if there's anything else you would add in terms of, you've already mentioned boxing clever. This is a question that came through from Bilal, which is, and what should you do if you have limited resources? So, is it really a case of going, because I think for a lot of for new businesses, it's quite daunting to, how do you approach social media? You've already mentioned kind of looking for your audience, looking for your competitors as well, and seeing where they're active. Was your suggestion to really, what would you suggest for someone that's in that scenario? Is it a case of getting yourself on as many platforms as possible, or being clever, as you said, and choose the ones that really work well for you and grow it with, in a way that's right for you and your business?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if your limited resources are financial, for example, and you can't afford to spend a lot of money on social media ads, then what's really critical for you to see success on social media is time investment. So by time investment, I mean spending time on the platform and doing kind of things that we would categorize as community management. So gaining that kind of recognition on the platform by, for example, on LinkedIn, you would go and you would connect with other people on the platform, and in the hopes that they connect with you, comment on other posts, share your content within groups, join discussions, etc. And so you're then kind of putting in the time and the effort to expand your reach and to gain recognition on a platform like that. So community management could be a really smart way for you to still grow your platforms significantly over time, but not having as much kind of advertising budget to spend. And then I think also with regards to limited resources, it in terms of time, finances, your strategy as a whole, look at all the platforms that you're on and kind of assess them in terms of what's working and what's not. If you've been posting on Instagram for the last couple of years and you still are getting a really, really low engagement rate, that might not be the place where your audience is, and you might be wasting time on that platform. You could use the time, energy, and resources of creating content for that platform and focusing your energy on a platform like Facebook, where you've seen results. And so you can kind of grow on that platform by putting in that time investment. So again, it's about boxing clever, about strategic community management, and then about looking at your strategy and where your audience is and being kind of clever in that way. With the kind of time management, I do feel that you can get quite significantly above the average organic rates that we're seeing on social media.
So thanks, Nicole. Yeah, I think that was a really important question from Bilal. Thanks, Bilal, because I think that's a big one for a lot of our clients and even friends and family that want to see on social media. It's a big concern, you know, it should be on everywhere. But yeah, as Nicole said, it's really about boxing clever and doing what's right for you and your brand or your business. This is a really good question, and these are actually two really good questions from close to Anya from Sinagugu, which is the first one is, what do you think has made Twitter Spaces more popular or more impactful than other similar apps like Clubhouse that we saw raised during lockdown? Yeah, that first question, Anya, can you give us a bit of insight?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we've definitely seen huge growth with Twitter Spaces, and I think it's an in-app functionality. So for most of us who are already on Twitter, we'll already have access to Twitter Spaces, and we can then join instead of needing to download a completely separate app. So I think ultimately it comes down to ease of access, and it comes down to something we all want, which is convenience.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's spot on. And then the second question was, is the TikTok landscape in SA as big as the international landscape? Basically asking if it's worth for a local business that wants to expand locally specifically.
Yeah, so the graph that we looked at earlier was the global audience of TikTok's ads. So the 18 to 24-year-old category is global, and in South Africa, the TikTok landscape is huge. So I think if you're looking at launching a local brand on TikTok, what's really cool about the app itself is that once you log in, you can see what's trending. So you'll be able to see what's trending locally in terms of dance challenges, in terms of audio, which is a keystone of TikTok. And you'll be able to see sort of trending conversations and things like that, which you can then tap into with your local brand, of course, if it suits your brand voice. So I think definitely worth a venture if your audience is between 18 to 35. Yeah, the landscape is huge.
And just one thing that I wanted to add on to what Anya was saying is, it just takes me back to what Anya mentioned earlier about there being so much room to break through in South Africa, because the TikTok audience has grown so rapidly in South Africa, but the ad functionality on the platform is still quite new, meaning that if you, with the right strategy and with the right budget, if you go and run an advertising campaign on TikTok, your reach, you have such a kind of better opportunity to break through the noise. Your reach, more people will see your ads, etc. So it really is that kind of prime time to kind of break into a new platform like that, because you're almost guaranteed to reach more people, and the competition is not as fierce as platforms like Facebook or Instagram.
Awesome. Thanks, Anya, Nicole. Another question that's just come through, or two questions that came through. I'm going to give the team a bit of a break and I'll answer the first one. It's a question from Beulah. Are websites dying, or do they still work for a specific business? So this is a big question we get, especially from clients that are coming on board that are really brand new. They've got a product or a service and they want to market it, and they don't even have social media or a website to start. What we always say to clients, and what I say to friends and family, is a website should work in conjunction with your social media. Really what's great about a website is that it offers you a lot more kind of customization, a lot more to tell you a lot more of your own story, which is often a really important thing for brands and businesses. So our suggestion would be always, think of your website as working in conjunction with. So it shouldn't necessarily tell the same story as your social media. Social media is great for speaking to not only your kind of the people that know you, but also new people and catching new business. So often the trend is that people will first find out about you on, whether it's Instagram or Facebook, and then if they choose to want to know more or to, deal with you directly, often your website is really the kind of the hook that gets them involved and lets them know more, which I think is really important. I hope that answers your, and Sarah's just added, I would say that a website is still the cornerstone of your online presence in terms of legitimacy, which is, yeah, a super important point. I think we've all, we often, we've all had that thing where we want to go to a restaurant and they might have an Instagram page and looking a bit sketchy and you're kind of like, where's the reviews? Often, whether they have a website with, TripAdvisor reviews or anything like that, that's often the thing that gives you a bit of legitimacy and a bit of weight. So yeah, I think a website is still super important. But yeah, think of it as working in conjunction with your social media. I think that's a super important definition to make. Another good question from Google, which is, you spoke about engagement decreasing. Do you have any tips or tricks on how to keep up the engagement? Maybe I'll pose this to Melissa. Was there what kind of tips that you would give to people working on social media?
Sure. So I think when it comes to things like engagement, it would really be important to kind of understand, your audience very well. Understand who it is that you're targeting and understand how they behave on different platforms. So it's important to also take a look at things like your insights and kind of gauge at what times they're kind of most active on the app. Also to study previous posts that you created as well, see which ones work best for your particular brand. If you're an influencer as well, there are actually quite a few interesting free tools that you can also use to kind of calculate engagement rates and also kind of get an idea of who you're reaching on the platform as well. When it comes to hashtags as well, you also want to not just kind of bombard your posts with a lot of different hashtags on LinkedIn or on Instagram. You really want to also understand whether or not these will actually work for you. So look at specific industry hashtags that work for your particular field or industry. Also look at using unique hashtags as well, random ones that could work for you that also would work very well on TikTok as well. And also kind of mix the content up a little bit as well. Using videos is also another great way to increase your engagements. If you're on Instagram, for example, Reels is also another great way for you to kind of break into different kinds of spaces and reach different types of people. And it is a great way to help you increase your engagement by essentially helping you find different types of people. And it's, I think, just using for different functionalities on the apps as well, just really studying what works for you. Because if you have a really acute understanding of how your brand looks within the space, how they operate, how your posts are looking, and then it really will give you a great idea as to what you need to focus more on, what you maybe need to consider jettisoning. So really, I'd say as much as possible, really understand where you fit in the general landscape.
Thanks, Melissa.
Sorry, just to add
go for it.
one thing on what you could try is doing engagement-focused posts or engagement-focused content. That's just what we call it. So you could start your post by asking a question, or you could use functionality like Melissa mentioned, like polls, making sure that you have a call to action in your content. So you're kind of nudging people to either respond, to comment, to share, to do something, to take an action on your post. So adding those things, if you haven't, might be something new that you could try.
Awesome. Thanks so much, team. We've just gone past 2, so we're going to have to call it a wrap. But thank you, everyone, for attending, especially the Nicole Cupidos. You've been fantastic. We really appreciate all the kind words. But no, seriously, thank you so much. And yeah, really thank you, everyone. And we'll be sure to do another one soon. It's been great, chatting to you all and kind of sharing. As I mentioned, we will make the webinar available. Please go and follow us on social media. Go follow our website. As we said, the website's super important. We will be posting the recording up there, including this Q&A session, so that everyone gets a full idea of how the session went. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you,
Have a great day
everyone, for
further.
joining. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.